Good evening. Happy Christmas, everybody. The old way was Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And we were always busy. We were either farming, planting rains, keeping the weeds at bay, or we were serving as soldiers. War does not stop. In fact, during the December time, the foliage is green, the farmers are isolated, and the insurgents step up the attacks. So I'm going to read from you tonight, chapter 6 of Tug's Trek, the roundabout way. Tug Morkel tells about moral injury. It's the events in life that determine feelings of guilt, shame, anger, and remorse, along with post-traumatic stress disorder and bipolar disorder. Tug soldiered on to try and preserve his trust in others. As a consequence, he developed a framework called D.R.E.A.M.S. I use that dreams all the time. So I'm going to fast forward to chapter 8. And if you go to my website and you'll click a link within the website, www.tugmorkel.com, you will find links to getting these chapters that I'm about to read. Chapter 7 and 6. Right, chapter 6. Into the fire with force. Like all healthy school leavers, I had received my call-up papers from the Rhodesian government and was directed to report for national service at Cranborne Barracks in January 1979. Cranborne was the home to the D.R.E.A.M.S, a battalion of soldiers known to me in my teenage years as the Incredibles. This was where I wanted to enlist and serve out my military commitment. Someone had to remain on the farm, so it was arranged my mother would drop me off while my father held the fort. The convoy leaves in 10. Keep smiling, but take this seriously, and I mean very seriously. I will always remember my father's parting words. The military convoy provided protection for civilians using national roads, and they were never late. The success of the Shamva-Salisbury armed convoy ensured our arrival in Salisbury without incident. Throughout the country, this kind of protection was organized as defensive support to keep the roads open. The lead vehicle was a mine and ambush protected MAP, infantry fighting vehicle. It was mounted on a Mercedes Unimog chassis capable of carrying 10 men. 2 police reservists drove the vehicle and rode shotgun on that day. This late 40s combination of farmer and miner were hardly men of the warrior type, but like all men and women in Rhodesia, they were doing their duty. The convoy of some 12 vehicles had made it through Danger Point, the remote area bordering the Masana Tribal Trust land. Each vehicle carried their own assortment of weapons, ranging from FNs, Uzis, shotguns, pistols, and revolvers. By the time I got to intake 163, I knew how to strip, clean, and fire all of them accurately. Nerves and uncertainty were 2 things, though. I had no expectations that this mental strain would lead to any reluctance about joining the army. This is what mature 18-year-old guys did, and the RLI was my unit of choice. Guy Mackenzie had been killed in action while serving in 2 Commando, and I sought to avenge his loss. Ian would be joining up as well. Fatigue circles had emerged from under my eyes whenever I slept badly, as I had the previous evening. My puffy eyes gave me a face of sad show, and I was not happy by disposition that day. I suffered from terrible hay fever. The pollen count is very high in Mashonaland during the summer rains. I rubbed the base of my nose and sniffed. My mother hated that. She told me off. If you do that in the army, they'll give you a desk job. I stopped sniffing immediately, but remained irritable because I also suffered a hangover from drinking and smoking too much. Another long silence fell between us as we approached Salisbury Drive off the Enterprise Road. Finally, I said, "You can have all my goats. You're not going away forever, Tug. You'll be back in 16 weeks from now." I told her that I didn't want them anymore and didn't feel right that I would be there to take care of replacing the copper sulfate in the footbath, which most of them jumped over anyway. I wasn't really committed anymore. She asked me how much I wanted for them. I said, "Nothing, Mum. You can have them." She said that she would buy them from me and put the money in my post office savings bank. My parents kept the 300 odd offspring from my original breeding herd and put over $600 into my account. The camaraderie in the army was energizing from the start. This would not be a walk in the park, but for most of the time we were in high spirits. Rhodesia was probably unique and quite different from other countries. The small landlocked country had a spirit and a common cause all of its own. It had not been turned from a wilderness of wild virgin bush to the breadbasket of Africa and a regional industrial powerhouse in a short 90 years through greed, selfishness, or laziness. The common bond holding the country together filtered down into the schooling system, and the young men who were sent straight from school to defend the country were all a similar mindset. I had met hundreds of young Rhodesians on the school sport field and met up with loads of guys who had been at guinea fowl with me. There were soldiers smartly dressed in camouflage, wearing red berets, indicating their attachment to the military police. They ordered us to get into lines. Some recruits laughed momentarily and then soon realized that the forthcoming disciplinary challenge would prove that all conscripts were in for a big shock. My initial desire to join the RLI faded when I discovered how many old fowlers were keen on training with the SAS, one of Rhodesia's elite units. I lined up with about 200 other potential recruits, and when a handful of senior SAS NCOs came down the line firing questions at us like, "What school did you go to and where did you live?" I didn't hesitate and proudly replied, "Guinea fowl, and I'm from Shanva." The guinea fowl part was important, and living in the Op Hurricane area added value to my credibility. My friend standing next to me was given his marching orders immediately with a curt shake of an NCO head. "Physically, you don't look the part. Off you go." He was a day scholar at a school in Salisbury. Had he stood his ground and showed some determination in the beginning, the SAS may have given him a chance. Bruce Spargo's words came to mind. "Come to the SAS. You don't get shot. It's not called special for nothing." The regular SAS soldiers attached to training troop then made us run up and down the rugby field 4 times and ordered us to do wind jammers and press-ups. No problem. We then lined up to have our blood pressure taken, and the African medic from the Corps of Medics noted my blood pressure was unusually high for an 18-year-old. I called him by his rank and assured him that I was fine. It was a case of too much beer and cigarettes of late. He laughed and let me through the gate, so to speak. I wasn't telling a lie. I got on board a truck with the others and we left the R.E.A.M.S barracks for Cabrit, the newly built SAS barracks near the Salisbury airport and the new Serum Air Force Base. It was now up to me, and I kept remembering my father's words about taking the training seriously. Somewhat impatient with what I wanted to achieve in the short time available, I isolated myself from people I knew so that I could take tough decisions when the situation called for it. I wasn't here to make friends. I wasn't here to lead. I was here to pass selection and get trained properly by the Rhodesian SAS. I had an advantage in that because I had left school a year earlier than my peers and was able to glean information from soldiers who I knew in the squadron, like Bruce Spargo, and in the Selous Scouts from playing rugby at old Aerians, and through socializing at various watering holes. Under the Official Secrets Act, nothing was ever said about operations, but the message about basic training and then selection was clear. Pay attention and never, ever give up. I estimated that about 180 recruits arrived at Cranborne Barracks, and I found a bed in a narrow building. It was the closest to the ablutions and closest to where we would fall in. Given the necessary instructions, I would ensure that what had to be done was done. Every character had a different personality, and my rigorous standards typically took over others' personal needs. I ended up next to another fowler called Bash. I felt sorry for the poor guy. He was always late, scruffy, and struggled with learning the characteristics of different weapons. Russian was the perfect recruit. He was intelligent, fit, enthusiastic, punctual, and methodical. He had it all. He could have laughed and smiled a bit more, but his Polish ancestry down the line reminded me of Lech Walesa. The affable Bash was killed in a car accident, and his brother later told me how he enjoyed my different kind of humour and energy. There was a diversity of personalities within our group. One guy who wanted to join his elder brother's footsteps and become a helicopter pilot. Steve M. was like no other. I called him Stefan and pronounced it as one would do in Sweden. From the moment he walked through the door, I smiled and knew that this was going to be fun. He passed most of the attributes of Russian and had a seriously good sense of humour. I took an instant liking to him. As recruits, we would find our way, and it was important to realize that the badged soldiers consigned to training troop at the time watched us around the clock. The selection process was subtly started back at the R.E.A.M.S in January, and from that point we were all under scrutiny for signs of strengths and weaknesses. The training was intense and constant, and each day brought us closer to that final selection course where even the fittest and most promising recruits frequently failed to meet the high standards of competency required. This was not a sprint. It was a middle distance run, and I kept myself firmly placed in the middle of as the events unfolded. My mission was to live for the future by making every moment count. Our level of fitness was exceptional, and I felt great. Now that I wasn't drinking and could only smoke occasionally, my energy levels were so much higher. Exercising my dominant yet independent temperament, I was quick to ally myself with those that possess dark humour and wit. Some of us knew intuitively what was necessary to achieve the goals. My housemaster's short reminder came to mind. What's good for the body is good for the mind, and vice versa. The training that was laid upon us increased both our mental and physical capabilities. We were asked to volunteer for driving. Those that did volunteer had to drive a broom in the officers' mess. They were destined to become drivers and wouldn't make it. Some were asked if they wanted to go to church on a Sunday. Half a dozen showed their hand. We never saw them again. They became RTU, return to unit. They became statistics. A training troop officer came close to be my friend, Gray Maguire, and asked him why he hadn't volunteered for anything. He wisely replied, the golden rule in the army is to never volunteer. I smiled. Some of the guys were obsessed with their childhood sweethearts. I miss my girlfriend. They were in the wrong business if they wanted to date girls. I stuck to the assigned workloads of lectures and physical education with passionate conviction, and we got hungry and thirsty. The SAS wouldn't drill their soldiers on empty stomachs, and the food was good. But as recruits, we had to earn our meals. Outside the mess hall was a horizontal bar, and before each meal, we were required to complete 10 pull-ups in front of the junior NCOs. I struggled. My long arms and heavy body made the physics of the exercise very difficult. The only thing to do was to be seen to be trying. Persevere, my motto from Highlands, always came to mind. As we progressed and built our strength, it became easier. The big guys like Podge, Will Skin, and I always got to eat last, but it never bothered me. Our upbringing at home and at school was all about taking our meals last. As I stuck to my ideals with conviction and was powerless to talk about them, occasionally I overreacted. You could not engage in any form of violence at all. On one occasion, there was no food left for a handful of us. Other recruits had helped themselves to a second helping. I got angry. I went over to the guilty parties and quietly said, make sure you don't get ambushed on a cross-country run sometime. We need to eat too. The threat worked, and a lot of recruits were well pleased with my tactic. I was, after all, in the company of other guys who also had their sights set on becoming ruthless young men. This moment in my life was all about turning my vision into reality and become part of an elite military unit. The diet was simple, and the powdered jungle juice with added water and supposedly copper sulfate to moderate our sexual libido, a wonderful thirst quencher. The daily routine was so simple. We carried rifles everywhere, and they had to be spotless. Lydia had hand-stitched my father a camouflage cotton cover, which slipped nicely over the end of the barrel, where the rocket launcher attachment was. It kept the dust and dirt out of the end of the barrel, and I could remove it quickly and shove it into my pocket. Dad had given it to me. I kept running in the middle of the pack and tried to draw as little attention to myself as possible. At times, there were always those that challenged convention. I tried not to do it. Those with high egos inevitably rose to the occasion. At the forefront of my mind was the need to keep in the middle of the pack and just plod on relentlessly. This was not officers' course. If just one recruit got out of line, we all paid for it. We had to endure arduous sessions of punishing pack drill well into the night, carrying 40-pound backpack and run until the NCOs were satisfied that the discipline had impacted our high egos. Our every move was watched, and as the training continued, recruits started showing signs of fatigue and weakness. There was no room for passengers in the unit, and those without the mental and physical strength to stay the distance were disqualified and sent elsewhere to serve the country. Change parades were the worst of it all. They always happened over the weekend if the barrack rooms were not perfect. Boot camp instructors had no difficulty in finding fault, and consequently barrack room inspections were doomed to fail before they started. We would be made to move the entire contents of each barrack room to the drill square. We'd then have to set everything up on the square in a straight line, get inspected, and then move everything back again. This was essentially a team effort. We wore black tackies, PT shorts, a vest, and a combat cap. The cap was always referred to with a capital C and pertained to an idiot. If we got sunstroke or malaria, we could be charged by the army. I continued to take a prophylactic for malaria, having lived in subtropical climate for 18 years. Our white skin pigment had already been damaged, but I was fortunate enough to inherit a little of my father's skin color. I had taken some good advice from my father. Try and sleep at every opportunity you can get, even if it's only for 10 minutes. It was my chance to grab a little recovery and restoration for my brain and body. Although having been brought up at home and at school and having to adhere to strict sleeping patterns, it soon became evident that I would be able to adapt. I became very flexible in coping with my sleeping patterns. You had to, or you were not going to make it. Feeling somewhat tired out once, I declined to have a cigarette during one of our well-deserved smoke breaks and rested up against a mafuti tree adjacent to the drill square. As I relaxed and started to doze off, I was unaware that an army of little red ants had crawled all over my neck. They had been attracted to the moisture from my sweat. I was awakened by a loud, "Fall in!" I jumped to my feet and scrambled for a position on the drill square. It was a hot summer's day. The ants were moving all over my body, neck and face, seeking to sap up moisture and salt. I did carry a glucose sweet, and they may have sought the sugar from that too. It became torture, and I had to move to scratch. I couldn't keep still any longer. The drill sergeant was looking the other way. Quickly, I tried to wipe the ants off my neck. 1, 2, 3 swipes off the back of my neck. I got away with it. Phew, temporarily. I felt relieved. 3 wipes at an army of ants was not enough, though. There were hundreds still moving all around me. With my left hand now, I went for it again. 1, 2, 3. Oh, goal! Screamed Corporal Jock P. Fall out. I cursed under my breath, as I knew I'd been caught, and I'd forgotten about him lurking in the background. I had to leave the drill square and stand alone. He came up to me and screamed, "Give me 100." What he meant was 100 press-ups. Although I thought this was going to be hell, which it was, it turned out to be a good deal in the long run. In the first instance, I was getting to get some extra exercise and a chance to build on my stamina. Secondly, I had to concentrate on getting through a tough activity of completing 100 press ups, which kept my mind off the fact that there were still hundreds of little ants crawling all over me. And more importantly, I had to complete the punishment in front of all the recruits and training officers, which I did duly without complaint and without interruption. I was up for it. The RSM also liked to watch drill, and he would have been impressed. Yes, the fearful snake. I wasn't the only one who was signaled out. The American physical training sergeant was extremely competent with fitness regimes, and the SAS didn't spend too much time on perfecting maneuvers on the drill square. We knew how to march, but it was all by no means perfect. The RLI, on the other hand, had perfected formation skills and marched their green colours through the ranks to perfection. Their performances whilst trooping the colour were exemplary. All exercises we carried out with live ammunition, and I could strip and reassemble the FN blindfolded so that I could do it in the dark by feeling my way around quietly. I learned that skill on the lounge floor on the farm when I was a schoolboy. I had the use of my father's FN, and he made me practice until I got it right. One fateful day on the shooting range, I would pay dearly for my complacency. We were shooting at falling plates, targets. I finished quickly and rested over my FN, waiting for the next order. The sergeant major barked the next order, "Clear weapons." I lost my concentration momentarily and went through what I thought at the time was now routine. We had been through it repeatedly. I had left one up in the chamber. I did not manage the charge, expecting to hear a faint little click without recoil. I pulled the trigger and had an accidental discharge. Bang! I was rather hoping that the discharge had gone unnoticed. We had been under the instruction at the time by the world practical pistol champion in Dave Westerhout. I would never forget his gentlemanly conduct and cool, calm temperament when he walked over and told me, "Keep calm." I did. It became the calm before the storm. The sergeant major made me run around the rest of the recruits for the entire lunch break, carrying 2 ammunition boxes on my back. I ran and ran and I fell. I got up and I kept running. I kept falling, and he said, "If you don't keep running, you are gone." Out of the SAS, I wasn't going to let that happen. I kept going and going, and he absolutely humiliated me to tears. I was going to forever remember that day and to manage the breach. However it turned out, I took it as a positive. I gained the respect of other recruits and training troop officers. It wasn't over though, and to add to my misery, I was assigned a heavy plough disc which I had to carry around for a week wherever I went. If any NCO caught me without it, I would be kicked off. I kept going. Nobody ever had a second accidental discharge. So that's the end of the chapter 6. Chapter 7 will be a lot shorter. So that's Tug Morkel sounding off. I'd like to know where you guys are living these days. Australia, America, Britain, South Africa. Drop a line where you're living, and if you resonate with army training, that's quite a lengthy chapter on going into the army, the Rhodesian army. Cheers for now.